There's a lot of tips and tricks out there that we often take as common knowledge that maybe others aren't aware of, especially some of the newer sailors. So while I was stuck in the house watching it pour rain outside, I figured I'd gather up a few pictures, put together a video to share the tips and tricks and odds and ends that I've found useful. Some of these tips I've likely gotten from someone else, but over time I've forgotten who gave them to me. So if I owe you credit or royalties, give me a shout. 3.5, 4 years ago, I was re-rigging the rotator on my LR5 to make it run smoother. One of the things I did was I replaced the grommet on the tramp with a Ronstand low friction ring. To do this, I cut a couple of carbon plates with slots in them. I made it so that the top plate slid from the front to the back, and the plate under the tramp slid from the back to the front to lock it in, and I secured the plates with a couple of screws. You can see here, this on my LR5, it was on a traditional tramp, and it really works well. Here's a picture of one that Ben Hall made and put on the solid tramp of the boat that I now own. On this one, he used a little bit of 5200 to secure the plates and make sure they were on there nice and solid. And here's one I just recently put on my boat for my over-rotator. It took me about an hour and a half to make the two plates. I made them using a handheld jigsaw to cut them and a rotary tool to sand the edges down. Speaking of low friction rings, here's one I tied onto the side stay to run my downhaul through, but I put this picture in to point out the cover on the synthetic rigging. The rigging on the side stay gets a lot of wear from my trap line, my tiller, and my main sheet rubbing against it. So the last set of synthetic rigging I got from SailMax, I had a cover put on it to cover the lower section of the synthetic line to reduce the wear. Here's a couple of things I did with my trap line to make it work better for me. Yep, first off, you guessed it, I used a low friction ring here with a Series 20 Ronstand block for my adjuster. Notice there's a tube over the rod line control line between the ring and the Series 20 block. This tube helps to keep the ring standing out from the line, so it makes it easier to grab when I'm going to hook up, and also it makes it easier when I'm swiping down to unhook the ring from my harness. I also replaced the line for my trap adjuster. On the recommendation of Sam Carter, I replaced the old line with a 7mm rod line Copa 5000. That's the blue line that's in the picture. I initially thought this would be too big, but it actually works really nice. It's much easier to cleat and uncleat than the previous 4mm line that I used, which would get buried in the cleat and I'd have to give it a hard yank to get it out. And the cover is nice and grippy, and the larger size is really great for my old hands. In this picture, you can see I spliced a length of shock cord into the trap line. Again, this was on the recommendation of Sam Carter. When I used to set my trap low, it had a tendency to slip, the ring would slip off my hook. So now splicing the shock cord into the line helps keep some upward tension on the ring and keeps it secured to my hook. I was having trouble keeping my boards up when I was going downwind, so here in this picture you can see I put a piece of SeaDek or HydroTurf non-skid on the slide plate. It works great, but it only lasts, I don't know, a couple of regattas or so and has to be replaced, so I'm still trying to think of a better way to get it done. I'm always trying to think of ways to make rigging and breaking down faster and easier. I figure if I can rig a boat and break it down without needing to use any tools, which I always seem to misplace, it'll be faster and I'll have a lot less pieces and parts that I have to keep track of. So the next couple of shots, I'm going to show some of the things I've done to try to go toolless. First up, here's my rotator arm. I used a splice loop with a knotted ball on the rotator arm. I just slipped the knot through a loop on the block to connect the arm and the block together. Here's a picture of my main sheet traveler lines. Instead of tying a knot to connect them, I spliced a Ronstand sister clip into the end of each one of the lines. I think I got this idea from Rush or Woody. The nice thing about this is the line doesn't get hung up when it runs through the retention ring. Also, note on this one, you can see the shock cord I have running through the hiking straps. I use these to keep my boards from sliding off the tramp or bouncing around when I'm wheeling the boat around. And here's another use for the Ronsan sister clips. I splice them into the lines controlling the rotation on my compass mount. I have another set of the sister clips that I attach to my mast plate. And finally, this is a picture that shows posts that I put on my mast plate that I made with nylon spacers and washers. I splice loops into the end of my over-rotator control lines, and then I slip those loops over top of these posts. Well, that's it for the toolless rigging. I'll finish up with a couple of odds and ends. First, what do you do with those rudders, with those delicate winglets? Ever since we started putting the winglets on the rudders, I've seen all sorts of ways people have tried to deal with safely storing and transporting them. Well, here's my rudder boxes. I took a plastic storage box and cut some slots in one end of them. I also keep my rigging and other bits and parts right in the box, so when I pull it out of the trailer, I have just about everything I need to rig the boat. Next up, a pole for your wheels. I think this idea first came from Europe. For me, it's one of the best things I added to my boat. I've seen a lot of different ways that people have added poles to their wheels. You can see here I used a PVC T-joint that I slipped over the axle. If you do make yours with this, make sure you use what's called a Schedule 80 PVC. The white Schedule 40 PVC just isn't strong enough to do the job. A couple of things I did on mine that really worked well for me is I made the short PVC pipe that's coming out of the T long enough so that if I don't have the pole attached, that will keep my wheels or bunks from turning over and turning upside down. I also replaced the carpet that were on the bumps with the HydroTurf non-skid, which works really nice, is nice and grippy, and keeps your boat on it. Well, there's all my secrets revealed. You know, there's a lot of creative people in the fleet, and someone has likely figured out a new and better way to do some of the things I shared here. But that's the ACAT fleet, isn't it? And that's why we're always tinkering on our boats. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you on the water soon.